Have you ever poured your entire soul into a job, only to have it stolen from you piece by piece, until you start to wonder if you even exist? If you have, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, then I want you to listen to this story, because it might just save you one day. It helps to know I'm not just screaming this into the void. So if you get what I'm saying, if you've ever felt like a ghost in your own career, let me know in the comments. Your story matters. And today, I'm finally telling mine. The end began with a question. A simple, condescending little question, dripping with the kind of false sweetness that only a true tyrant can master. Eleanor Vance, the legendary editor-in-chief of Aura magazine, leaned back in her sprawling ergonomic chair, a throne of black leather and polished chrome that probably cost more than my entire college education. Her office was a glass box suspended high above the city, a sterile white terrarium where she cultivated trends and casually destroyed lives. She looked at me, her unpaid intern, on my very last day. A faint, surgically precise smile played on her lips. It was the same smile she used for C-list celebrities and advertisers who were late on their payments. It didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were like chips of expensive granite. She asked, her voice a low purring threat. "Have you any final contributions, Madison?" The air in the room was cold and smelled faintly of jasmine and ozone, the signature scent of overwhelming power. For 6 months I had breathed that air. I had fetched her ridiculously complicated coffees, organized her color-coded files, and endured her casual, soul-crushing critiques. For 6 months I had been her shadow, her ghostwriter, her silent, uncredited workhorse. My contributions had been the lifeblood of her last two quarterly issues. Pitches I'd researched for weeks, headlines I'd brainstormed at 3 in the morning, entire feature concepts I'd mapped out. All of it absorbed into the great gleaming machine of Aura, and stamped with her name. My final contribution. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the kind of calm that comes after a storm, when the air is still and heavy and you can finally see the horizon. The fear I had lived with for months, the constant low-grade hum of anxiety about pleasing her, about being good enough, had finally burned itself out. There was nothing left but a cold, clear certainty. I smiled back. It was a real smile, my first real one in this office, and I could feel the unfamiliar muscles stretching in my cheeks. I said, "As a matter of fact, Eleanor, I do." I reached into my tote bag, past my worn-out notebook, and the spare pair of flats I kept for coffee runs. My fingers closed around a thick, crisp manila folder. It felt heavy in my hand, heavy with the weight of sleepless nights and whispered secrets. I placed it gently on the vast expanse of her stark white desk. The sound was a soft, definitive thud in the silent room. She looked at the folder, then at me, an eyebrow arched in mild irritation. She hated clutter on her desk. "It's a fully sourced piece," I said, my voice steady. "I think it's some of my best work." Her expression shifted from irritation to a flicker of something else. Greed, maybe. She assumed it was another idea for her to steal, one last golden egg from the goose she was about to discard. She reached for it, her long manicured fingers extending like a predator's claws. I kept my hand on it for a moment longer. "It's an exposé," I continued, my voice still quiet, but now it carried a different weight. "On the toxic work culture at this magazine. It's built around anonymous, but fully verifiable, quotes from every single intern who has worked in this office for the past 3 years. Damning quotes, Eleanor." Her hand froze. The smile vanished. The mask of composed, untouchable power didn't just crack. It shattered. For a single beautiful second, I saw the real Eleanor. I saw the panic, the fury, the primal fear of a queen who has just heard the click of a lock on her own castle gates. I let go of the folder. "That," I said, "is my final contribution. Oh, and I took the liberty of sending a copy to a reporter I know. A man named Liam Chen. I believe you know his work. He's at the Vanguard." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the glass box, leaving the folder sitting on her desk like a time bomb. I didn't look back. I could feel her eyes on me, two hot points of hatred boring into my spine. But for the first time I wasn't cold. A quiet heat was flushing up my neck, a warmth that had nothing to do with shame or fear. It felt like victory. It felt like justice. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how we got to that moment, to that folder on that desk, you have to understand how it all began. You have to understand the girl who walked into that office 6 months earlier, the one who would have done anything, absolutely anything, for Eleanor Vance. The night my final stolen article went live, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of my tiny shoebox apartment, in a neighborhood so far from the glittering spire of the Aura building, that it might as well have been in another state. The only light came from my laptop screen, illuminating the glossy digital pages of the magazine. And there it was, the Loom Reborn Artisanal Textiles, and the New Face of Couture, by Eleanor Vance. My title, my angle, my contacts, my weeks of painstaking research, my late-night calls to weavers in rural Italy and textile historians in London. My words twisted and polished into her voice. She'd even kept a few of my sentences whole, like a serial killer keeping a souvenir. I closed the laptop. The sudden darkness was a relief. I wrapped my arms around my knees, and just sat there, the silence of my apartment, a stark contrast to the roaring in my head. It wasn't a loud, angry roar. It was a quiet, grinding sound like tectonic plates of belief shifting inside me. The belief that hard work is always rewarded. The belief that talent will always shine through. The belief that if you just keep your head down and do the work, someone someday will notice. They were all lies. Beautiful, seductive lies that the world tells people like me, the ones on the outside looking in, the ones who arrive with nothing but ambition and a willingness to be exploited. I finally let myself cry, not loud, heaving sobs, but hot, silent tears that tracked down my face and dripped onto my jeans. They were tears for the girl who had practically vibrated with excitement on her first day. I thought back to that morning, 6 months ago. I'd stood in front of the monolithic Aura headquarters, a cathedral of glass and steel, clutching my bag so tightly my knuckles were white. Getting an unpaid internship at Aura was like finding a golden ticket. It was the absolute pinnacle for any aspiring journalist. It was a chance to learn from the best, to be in the room where it happens, to breathe the same air as Eleanor Vance. I remembered the first time I saw her. She swept into the morning editorial meeting, like a weather system, all sharp angles and expensive fabric. The entire room seemed to snap to attention, the energy shifting from a lazy hum to a high-frequency thrum. She didn't just walk. She glided, a shark in a sea of her own making. And when her eyes, those cool gray eyes, had landed on me, the lowly intern, she'd offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. She'd said, "Welcome to Aura, Madison. We expect great things." That little crumb of acknowledgement sustained me for a month. It was pathetic. I see that now. It's debatable character logic. I know. Why would anyone work that hard for free, for a single meaningless nod? But at the time her approval felt like sunlight. I saw it as a test. I wasn't just an intern. I was an apprentice paying my dues. I told myself this was the price of admission to a world I desperately wanted to join. It was a world of beauty and power, of stories that shaped culture. I wanted to be a part of it so badly that I was willing to let parts of myself be carved away. This misplaced loyalty, this burning ambition, it was a form of self-deception. I wasn't just being exploited. I was a willing participant in my own erasure, all for the dream of one day seeing my name in print in those hallowed pages. The first theft was small, almost unnoticeable. It was in my third week. We were in a headline meeting for a small online-only feature about minimalist jewelry. The room was stuck. Everyone was throwing out the same tired phrases. Less is more. Simply stunning. I was in the corner, taking notes, supposed to be invisible, but an idea sparked. I scribbled it down. When there was a lull, my heart hammering, I spoke up. My voice was barely a whisper. "What about the eloquence of absence?" Eleanor's head snapped toward me. The room went silent. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she turned back to the senior editor. Let's go with the eloquence of absence. Good work, Jessica. Jessica, the senior editor, blinked in surprise but quickly recovered, and nodded accepting the praise. My stomach twisted, but I said nothing. I told myself it didn't matter. It was just a headline. It was for the good of the magazine. It wasn't about the credit. It was about contributing. Another lie. It was always about the credit. The pattern was established. A drip feed of my ideas. My research. My words into the aura machine. A clever turn of phrase here. A contact for a hard-to-reach designer there. Each time, it was absorbed without a trace of my involvement. Each time, I swallowed the bitter pill of my own invisibility. I saw it happen to others, too. I remembered Sam, a bright-eyed intern from the art department. He'd spent a weekend reformatting a massive presentation for Eleanor, fixing a dozen errors made by a senior designer. On Monday morning, during the presentation, Eleanor found a single typo on the last slide. She didn't just point it out. She stopped the entire meeting, fixed her icy gaze on Sam, and dismantled him, piece by piece, in front of 20 people. She called his work ethic insulting, and his attention to detail a liability to the brand. He was pale, trembling, trying to apologize. She cut him off. Get out. He packed his desk that afternoon, and I never saw him again. No one mentioned his name. After that day, he had been erased. My own moment of personal petty humiliation came a month later. The coffee incident, as I came to call it. Eleanor had a very specific, very difficult coffee order. A single origin Ethiopian bean, brewed with a pour-over method at precisely 202 degrees Fahrenheit, served with one raw sugar cube, and a whisper of oat milk, steamed to exactly 145 degrees. There was only one cafe in a 10-block radius that could be trusted to make it correctly. That morning, their machine was broken. I panicked. I called Eleanor's assistant, who simply said, "Figure it out." So I did. I ran in the rain, 12 blocks in the other direction to a cafe a friend had once mentioned. I explained the order with the desperation of a hostage negotiator. I paid with my own money. I sprinted back, shielding the cup from the rain with my own jacket, my blouse soaked through. I presented it to her, my heart still racing, my hair dripping onto the pristine white floor of her office. "I'm so sorry for the delay, Eleanor. Their machine was..." She took the cup, not looking at me. She lifted it to her lips, paused, and then lowered it. She walked over to the small, elegant plant in the corner of her office, and poured the entire contents into the soil. "It's tepid," she said, without turning around. Her back was to me. Dismissal. I stood there, dripping and humiliated, for what felt like an eternity. Then I turned and walked out. That was the moment I started to hate her. Not just fear her, but truly deeply hate her. Now sitting in the dark of my apartment, all these memories swirled around me, not as isolated incidents, but as a clear, horrifying tapestry. The stolen words, Sam's public execution, the tepid coffee poured into a plant. It was a system. A culture of cruelty and exploitation, all designed to feed one person's ego. The injustice of it was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The dream of Aura was dead, and in its place was the cold, hard reality of what the place truly was, a monument to the glorious, unassailable power of one woman. And I was just another casualty. The despair was a thick, suffocating fog. I felt so small, so utterly defeated. What could I possibly do? I was an unpaid intern, with no power, no platform, no voice. She was Eleanor Vance. She was untouchable. The fight was over before it even began. I mindlessly picked up my phone, my thumb scrolling through the endless cheerful lives of other people. A picture of a friend's baby, a post about a new restaurant, and then a post that cut through the noise. It was from Chloe Kim. She had been the intern a year before me, in the features department. I'd met her only once, at a mandatory holiday mixer. We had bonded for a few minutes over the terrible canapés. I remembered her sharp, intelligent eyes, and the weary, knowing look she'd given me when I'd gushed about how excited I was to be there. She had left Aura and was now working for a small, scrappy, independent art zine. Her post was a picture of their latest issue, a humble black and white publication. The caption read, "It's not glossy, but it's ours. So proud of what we can build when we own our own voices." Own our own voices. The words hit me like a jolt of electricity. The fog of despair began to recede, replaced by something else, something cold and sharp and clear. A thought, so audacious and terrifying, that it made my breath catch. What if my voice was the one thing she couldn't steal? What if the problem wasn't that I was powerless, but that I had been fighting on her battlefield, by her rules? Her rules were about individual glory, about climbing a ladder by stepping on the people below you. What if I changed the rules? I looked at my laptop, still closed on the floor. It contained the evidence of my own erasure. But I wasn't the only one. There was Sam. There was Chloe. How many others were there? How many bright, ambitious young people had been chewed up and spit out by this machine? A pattern of abuse is not an anecdote. It's a story. A major story. The tears had stopped. My breathing was even. A quiet heat started to build in my chest. A pilot light of pure, unadulterated resolve. I stood up and walked over to my desk. I opened a new blank document. I typed a single word at the top of the page. Archive. This was the catalyst. The turning point. The moment the victim decided to become the prosecutor. The quiet fury that had been simmering for months finally had a purpose. It wasn't about getting an apology. It wasn't about getting credit for one stupid article. It was about creating a record. A permanent, undeniable record of what happened in the shadows of those hallowed halls. I realized in that moment of cold clarity that this wasn't about revenge. It was about journalism. The most important piece of journalism I would ever write. And I would use the very skills Eleanor had taught me to admire, the very meticulousness she had exploited, to build a case so airtight, so thoroughly documented, that not even the great Eleanor Vance could dismiss it as the ramblings of a disgruntled intern. She had taught me how to build a story. She just never imagined it would be hers. The decision to create the archive was like flipping a switch in a dark room. The vague, shapeless anger I felt coalesced into a sharp, focused beam of purpose. I wasn't just sad or defeated anymore. I was a woman with a project. And this project required a level of strategic thinking and secrecy I hadn't known I was capable of. My first move was to create a new digital identity. I bought a cheap refurbished laptop with cash and set up a new email address through a secure encrypted service, one that journalists in hostile territories use. My personal laptop, the one I'd used for Aura work, was a liability. I treated it as compromised. Everything related to the archive would exist on this new firewalled machine, a ghost in the digital world. The document I had started, archive, became my sanctuary and my war room. I began by writing down my own story, every single detail, from the first stolen headline to the last condescending smirk. I forced myself to be clinical, objective. I listed dates, times, names of witnesses. I transcribed my notes from the artisanal textiles project, highlighting the sections that appeared nearly verbatim in Eleanor's published piece. It was a painful, cathartic process, like setting a broken bone. It hurt, but I knew it was the first step toward healing. But my story alone wasn't enough. It could be dismissed. I was one person. The strength of this project, its undeniable power, would be in numbers. It needed to be a chorus, not a solo, and that meant I needed my first ally. I needed Chloe. Finding her was easy enough. Her name and the name of her zine were public. The hard part was making the call. My hand hovered over the dial button on my phone for a full 5 minutes. What if she said no? What if she thought I was crazy? What if, even worse, she was still afraid of Eleanor and warned her? The paranoia was a physical sensation, a prickling on my skin, but the memory of her caption, "Own our own voices," pushed me forward. I pressed the button. It rang 3 times. A voice answered, cautious. Hello? Chloe. It's Madison. Madison Scott. We met at the Aura holiday party last year. I was the intern after you. There was a long pause. I could hear the sound of a keyboard clacking in the background. Then the clacking stopped. Oh, right. Madison. I remember. How is you? Her voice was guarded, laced with a familiar weariness that I now understood perfectly. She knew why an intern from Aura was calling her. It was a call from a soldier still on the front lines. To one who had already escaped. I'm on my last 2 weeks, I said, deciding that directness was the only way. I just saw your post about your new zine. It looks amazing. Congratulations. Thanks, she said. The caution still there. It's a lot of work, but it's ours. That's actually why I'm calling, I said, taking a deep breath. I want to talk to you about that. About owning our voices. I'm working on something, Chloe. A story. And I think you might be able to help. The conversation that followed was one of the most terrifying and exhilarating of my life. I laid it all out for her. Eleanor, the stolen work, the culture of fear. I didn't mention the archive by name. I just called it a dossier. As I spoke, I could almost feel her defenses lowering over the phone line. When I finished, the line was silent. For so long I thought she'd hung up. Then she spoke, her voice low and intense. The portfolio, she said. What? My final portfolio. For my grad school application. I spent my entire internship building it. A collection of pieces, mock-ups, layouts. Eleanor offered to review it for me on my last day. She said she wanted to help. She gave me some notes, told me it was promising. The next month, Aura launched a new digital supplement. The entire design, the layout, the fonts, it was my portfolio. They just plugged their content into my work. When I tried to email her about it, her assistant replied, saying Eleanor had no recollection of my designs, and that all work produced by interns was the intellectual property of the magazine. The raw, unhealed pain in her voice was a mirror of my own. That was it. The moment she went from a potential source to a co-conspirator. I have a list, she said, her voice now hard as steel. An Excel sheet. Every intern from my year and the year before. Names, emails, and a little column for notes. I started it as a support group. A way for us to stay in touch. Now, I think it has another purpose. That spreadsheet was the key. It was the blueprint for our network. Over the next 2 weeks, my last 2 weeks at Aura, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the perfect obedient intern, smiling, fetching coffee, and quietly counting down the hours. I was a ghost, haunting the halls, my face a mask of pleasant neutrality. But at night, my apartment transformed. It became the headquarters of a quiet, methodical rebellion. Chloe and I would get on encrypted video calls, the glow of our screens illuminating our determined faces. We divided the list. We developed a script. We decided that I, as the most recently wronged, would make the initial contact. My story was fresh, and it would serve as the catalyst. The first few calls were nerve-wracking. We started with the people Chloe had marked as friendly. A former photo intern named Marcus was our first success. I told him my story. He listened patiently. When I was done, he just sighed. Her? Yeah, that tracks, he said, his voice flat. She made me spend a whole weekend scanning and retouching her personal family photos for her mother's birthday. Hundreds of them. Told me it was good practice for learning the Aura aesthetic. I was too scared to say no. Use my story. Just, please, for the love of God, don't use my name. That became the chorus. Use my story, but not my name. Each call was a new chapter in the same grim book. A fashion closet intern, who was regularly sent on Eleanor's personal shopping errands, using her own money for reimbursement that never came. A features intern whose detailed research on emerging Gen Z artists in Brooklyn was lifted wholesale for a trend piece, again under Eleanor's byline. We hit a wall with some of the interns from 3 years back. Their contact information was outdated. This is where Chloe's ingenuity became our greatest asset. She was a master of the digital breadcrumb trail. She scoured LinkedIn, university alumni databases, even the public records of professional guilds. She found them, one by one. One of the most crucial breakthroughs came from a woman named Anya, an intern from 2 years prior, who was now in her final year of law school. When I told her what we were doing, she went quiet. Then she said, "Did you sign an NDA?" "Yes," I said, my stomach tightening. "We all did." "Unpaid intern?" she asked. "Yes," she laughed. A short, sharp, bitter sound. "That NDA is likely worth less than the paper it's printed on. In most states, a contract requires consideration for both parties. Your pay is your consideration. If you're not getting paid, the enforceability of a broad restrictive NDA like the one Aura uses is highly debatable, especially when it comes to reporting unethical or potentially illegal behavior. She isn't a lawyer specialized in this, so this was another one of those debatable logic points. A plausibly inaccurate piece of advice that would fuel comments, but for us in that moment, it felt like gospel. She told me, "I'm not your lawyer, and this isn't formal legal advice," but what she was really giving us was courage. She reviewed the standard intern NDA from her year and sent us a breakdown of its potential weaknesses. This document became a key part of our pitch to other more hesitant interns. The stories kept coming. We created a secure, anonymous online form for those who were too afraid to speak to us directly. The floodgates opened. It was a deluge of quiet humiliations and grand-scale exploitation. Dozens and dozens of testimonies. We had it all. The emotional manipulation, the financial exploitation, the intellectual property theft. Our hidden leverage wasn't just the stories themselves. It was the sheer, overwhelming, undeniable pattern. No one could claim this was a one-off incident or a misunderstanding. It was a documented, 3-year reign of terror. The volume was our weapon. As the stories piled up, my role shifted from investigator to author. I began to weave the threads together. I wasn't just compiling a list of grievances. I was writing an article. I used the high-minded analytical tone of Aura itself, turning the magazine's own style against it. I structured it like a long-form investigative piece, with a clear thesis, supporting evidence, and corroborating testimony. The anonymous quotes were the heart of it, each one a testament to a voice that had been silenced. The final document was over 50 pages long. It was polished, professional, and utterly damning. It was the best thing I had ever written. The final piece of the plan was the delivery mechanism. It couldn't just leak onto the internet. It needed to land with the force of a surgical strike. It needed a credible platform. I'd been following the work of Liam Chen at the Vanguard for years. He was an old-school investigative reporter, with a reputation for taking down powerful people. He was also known for protecting his sources. 2 weeks before my final day, I used my secure email to send him a message. The subject line was tip regarding a major fashion publication. The message was brief. "I have credible information about a long-term worked in intern exploitation at a top-tier magazine. The story involves intellectual property theft and a hostile work environment perpetuated by a high-profile editor. The evidence is extensively documented. Are you interested?" I didn't name Aura. I didn't name Eleanor. I didn't name myself. I hit send, my heart pounding. For 24 hours, there was nothing. I was convinced he'd deleted it as spam. Then a reply appeared in my inbox. One sentence. "I'm listening." We began a slow, careful correspondence. I fed him small, verifiable details, building trust. He was cautious, professional. He asked the right questions. He never pushed for my identity. By the time my final day at Aura arrived, he was primed. He knew a package was coming. He just didn't know how big it was. So when I walked into Eleanor's office on that final afternoon, I wasn't just an intern going through a pointless exit interview. I was the delivery agent of a plan that had been months in the making. A plan built on the shared pain and quiet defiance of dozens of people she had tried to erase. The folder in my hand wasn't just paper and ink. It was an archive of our collective voice. It was a reckoning.
And it was my true final contribution. The moment after I walked out of Eleanor's office was surreal. I strode through the newsroom, past the rows of desks, where people were frantically typing and taking calls, their faces illuminated by the glow of their monitors. No one looked up. To them I was just another intern leaving, a temporary fixture being removed. The invisibility, that had once been a source of pain, was now my shield. I didn't have to perform. I didn't have to smile. I just had to walk. I didn't take the elevator. I took the stairs. All 34 flights. I needed the physical exertion, the rhythmic burning protest of my muscles. Each step down was a step away from her world, from that glass box in the sky. When I finally pushed open the heavy door to the ground floor lobby, the blast of city air, humid and smelling of hot pavement and exhaust fumes, felt like the first breath of my new life. I walked out onto the street, and didn't look back at the gleaming tower. I felt a profound sense of release, but it was immediately followed by a wave of pure gut-wrenching terror. What have I done? The question echoed in the sudden emptiness. The plan had seemed so perfect, so righteous in the quiet of my apartment, but out here, in the real world, it felt like I had just detonated a bomb, and was standing at ground zero.
I found a small, anonymous coffee shop a few blocks away, ordered a black coffee I didn't want, and sat at a wobbly table in the corner. I pulled out my burner phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type in the password. The first thing I did was email Liam Chen. The subject line, package delivered. The body of the email contained only a link to a secure cloud folder containing the digital version of the archive, the password, and a short message. The original is now with the subject. As we discussed, you have the exclusive, all sources are to remain anonymous. I trust you'll handle this with the care it deserves. I hit send. The die was cast, then I texted Chloe. It's done. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Her reply, holy expletive. Are you okay? I typed back, ask me again in 24 hours. For the next few hours, there was only silence. It was the loudest silence I have ever heard. Every notification on my phone made my heart leap into my throat. I imagined Eleanor, her face a mask of cold fury, handing the folder to her legal team. I imagined lawyers dissecting my words, looking for any loophole, any mistake, any way to destroy me. The NDA I'd signed, which Anya had so confidently dismissed, now felt like a noose tightening around my neck. The debatable logic of a law student versus the full force of a multi-billion-dollar media conglomerate's legal department felt like a very, very bad bet. Had my defiance been an act of bravery or an act of career suicide? The first ripple from my silent takeover came around 6 p.m. It was a text from Chloe. She had a friend, another former intern, who still worked at Aura in the ad sales department. The text read, confirmed. Evie is in a closed-door meeting with the publisher, and two guys from corporate legal. My friend said she walked in looking like thunder, and no one has come out for over an hour. The entire floor is spooked. I read the message 3 times. It was happening. The machine was reacting. The panic was beginning. It wasn't a feeling of triumph, not yet. It was a feeling of dread and validation, a toxic cocktail of emotions. I had poked the beast, and now it was awake. The next move came not from Aura, but from Liam Chen. He was a master of his craft. He didn't just start writing, he loaded his weapon and aimed it. At 9 a.m. the next morning, as I sat in my apartment nursing my third cup of coffee, I got a forwarded email from Chloe. Her friend on the inside had been copied on it, likely by a panicked superior. It was from Liam. He had sent it to Eleanor, her direct publisher, the head of HR, and the general counsel of Aura's parent company, Omni Media. The email was a work of art, a masterpiece of journalistic aggression veiled in professional courtesy. To whom it may concern, it began. I am a senior investigative reporter with the Vanguard. I am currently writing a story about allegations of a hostile and exploitative work environment within Aura magazine, specifically concerning the treatment of interns over the 2021 to 2024 period. My reporting, which is based on a comprehensive dossier I have obtained, includes numerous detailed, first-hand accounts of intellectual property theft, verbal abuse, and the use of unpaid labor for personal tasks, all allegedly under the direction of Editor-in-Chief Eleanor Vance. We have testimony from more than 20 former interns, all of whom have agreed to be quoted anonymously. We feel it is only fair to offer you the opportunity to comment on these serious allegations before we proceed with publication. We are operating on a deadline of 5 p.m. tomorrow. Sincerely, Liam Chen. Reading it, I felt a chill run down my spine. He had called it a comprehensive dossier. He had mentioned more than 20 interns. He had set a deadline. He hadn't just presented them with a problem. He had cornered them. He had taken my quiet, methodical work and turned it into a public threat. The effect inside Aura was, according to Chloe's source, immediate and catastrophic. The news of Liam's email spread through the office like a virus. Eleanor, who had tried to contain the situation with her small circle of lawyers, was now exposed. Corporate was involved. The problem was no longer a disgruntled intern. It was a public relations nightmare waiting to happen. Eleanor's panic, from what we could piece together, manifested as paranoia. She started trying to hunt the leak. She apparently convened a meeting with her senior editorial staff, and instead of addressing the issue, began interrogating them. Who had been talking to Liam Chen? Who had a grudge? Her accusations grew wild, implicating loyal deputies who had been with her for years. She was creating chaos, turning her own inner circle against her. In her attempt to find the source of the fire, she was spraying gasoline all over the room. That afternoon, she tried to get ahead of the story. A memo was sent out to all Aura staff. Chloe forwarded it to me instantly. It was a page of corporate doublespeak, about reaffirming our commitment to a positive and nurturing mentorship environment, and launching a new initiative to streamline the intern feedback process. It was so transparently a panic move that it was almost comical. It was an admission of guilt disguised as a press release. She was trying to build a new house on a foundation that she didn't know I had already wired with explosives. The silence from Eleanor's camp toward me was deafening. I had expected a threatening letter from her lawyer within hours. Nothing. It meant they were taking it seriously. It meant they knew a simple threat wouldn't work. The folder I had given her, my meticulously sourced archive, was a fortress. They couldn't attack me without validating the contents. The silent takeover was in full swing. I hadn't fired a shot publicly. I hadn't leaked a thing. I had simply delivered a single package of information to 2 key locations. And with that one quiet act, the gears of a much larger machine had begun to turn. The power was shifting, moving away from the glass office and the all-powerful editor, and toward the quiet, undeniable truth that was now sitting on a reporter's desk. I had built the weapon and handed it to a trained soldier. Now all I could do was wait for the sound of the first shot. The first public crack in Eleanor's fortress appeared not in print, but on social media. It came from an unexpected place, but one that Chloe and I had, in our wildest dreams, hoped for. Antoine Dubois, a world-renowned fashion photographer, was a legend known for his mercurial temperament and his fierce loyalty. I had worked as a production assistant on one of his shoots for Aura 3 months prior. It was a grueling 18-hour day, and I had spent most of it anticipating his every need, from sourcing a specific type of vintage film to making sure his tea was brewed correctly. At the end of the shoot, as everyone was packing up, he had stopped me, looked me right in the eye, and said, "You have good eyes. You see what is needed before it is asked for. That is rare. Don't let them grind it out of you." It was a small moment, but it had stayed with me. Now at 2 p.m., the day after Liam Chen's email, Antoine posted a stark black and white text image to his 2 million Instagram followers. It read, "Art requires a safe and respectful environment to flourish. In light of disturbing rumors I have recently heard concerning the culture at Aura magazine, I will be indefinitely postponing my participation in the upcoming November cover shoot. I cannot in good conscience create beauty in a space where young talent is reportedly devalued and exploited. My principles are not for sale. He didn't name Eleanor. He didn't mention interns. He didn't have to. The entire industry knew. Within an hour, the post was everywhere, picked up by fashion blogs and trade publications. The disturbing rumors were now public, and they had a powerful, credible voice attached to them. The figurative exodus had begun. Antoine's departure was a signal to everyone else. The ship was taking on water. The next blow was financial. Aura's biggest advertiser was a French luxury goods conglomerate, Veridian. I knew from my time there that their ad buy for the next quarter was worth north of $5 million. I had spent a week of my internship compiling market research that was used in the pitch to secure that very deal. Chloe's friend in ad sales sent us a frantic one-line text. Veridian just put the Q4 buy under immediate review, pending the outcome of an internal matter. We are hemorrhaging. The power shift was no longer a theoretical concept. It was real, and it was quantifiable in dollars and celebrity clout. Eleanor's power was derived from her ability to attract talent and money to the magazine. My quiet strategic move had started a chain reaction that was threatening both pillars of her empire. That was when she finally reached out to me. The desperate counteroffensive began. The first attempt was an email from her personal account, sent late in the afternoon. The subject was a misunderstanding. Dear Madison, it read. I believe there has been a serious misunderstanding. My office is a demanding environment, and I admit my communication style can be direct. It was never my intention to make you feel unappreciated. The work you contributed was valuable. Perhaps we can discuss this in person and find a path forward. It was breathtaking in its arrogance. The complete refusal to take any responsibility, the framing of systemic exploitation as a misunderstanding. I didn't even dignify it with a response. I just deleted it. An hour later, my personal phone rang. An unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. The message that followed was pure, unfiltered Eleanor. The saccharine sweetness was gone, replaced by a voice tight with fury. Madison, this is Eleanor Vance. You are playing a very, very dangerous game. You signed a non-disclosure agreement. It is a legally binding document. My lawyers are reviewing it right now, and I assure you, Omni Media will not hesitate to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law for this malicious and defamatory stunt. You are destroying your career before it has even begun. Call me back immediately. The threat was clear, but it felt hollow. It was the roar of a wounded animal. I thought of Anya, the law student, and her confident dismissal of the NDA. It might have been debatable logic, but at that moment, I chose to believe in it. Her threat was based on the old rules, the rules of a game I was no longer playing. The final move was the most desperate of all. The next morning, I got a call from a woman in Aura's HR department. Her voice was syrupy and professional. She told me that after a review of my time at the magazine, they had been incredibly impressed with my potential. They wanted to offer me a position, a full-time salaried position as a junior features writer. They were even prepared to offer me a signing bonus, a gesture of goodwill to compensate me for any negative feelings I might have from my internship experience. It was the job I would have killed for 6 months ago. It was everything I had dreamed of. And now, hearing it offered, I felt nothing but a cold, clear disgust. It was a bribe. A clumsy, insulting attempt to buy my silence. I let her finish her pitch. Then I responded. My voice calm and even. Thank you for the offer, I said. But that position is no longer of interest to me. I have other projects I'm pursuing. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. She stammered something about the offer being a significant opportunity. I understand, I said, cutting her off gently. But my answer is no. Goodbye. I hung up the phone. That was the moment I truly understood the power shift. It wasn't just that they were losing money or talent. It was that I was no longer afraid of them. They had nothing left to offer me, and nothing left to threaten me with. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their job. I had my own project. I had my own voice.
The power hadn't just shifted away from Eleanor. I had consciously, deliberately, and irrevocably taken it back for myself. The end for Eleanor Vance came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after my exit interview. It wasn't a dramatic face-to-face confrontation in a boardroom. I think in a way, that was the most fitting end for her. My victory wasn't loud. It was silent, digital, and absolute. Liam Chen's article dropped at 8 a.m. on the Vanguard's website. The headline was stark, brutal, and perfect. The devil wears out her welcome inside the toxic culture of Aura magazine. I read it sitting at my small kitchen table, the same place where the idea for the archive had been born. My hands were steady as I scrolled. Liam had done a masterful job. He had used my dossier as the spine of the story, weaving in the anonymous quotes with devastating precision. For years, Aura magazine has sold a dream of glamour and success, the article began. But for a rotating cast of young, unpaid interns, that dream was a nightmare. A months-long investigation by the Vanguard, based on a meticulously compiled 50-page dossier and interviews with over 20 former interns, reveals a pattern of systemic exploitation, intellectual property theft, and verbal abuse orchestrated by its celebrated editor-in-chief, Eleanor Vance. He quoted Marcus, the photo intern. "I was essentially her free personal photo archivist," one former intern told us. "I spent an entire weekend of my own time restoring her private family photos, a task that had absolutely nothing to do with my role or my learning experience." He quoted the intern from the fashion closet. "I was regularly sent on errands to pick up her dry cleaning or buy personal items. I'd put it on my own credit card, and the reimbursement forms would just disappear. I lost hundreds of dollars." And he quoted me, without naming me, describing the stolen article. "You pour your heart into a project, research it for weeks, and then you see it in print with her name on it. It's not just that she steals your work, she erases your existence." The article was a bombshell. It was the #1 trending topic on Twitter within an hour. The industry was in an uproar. Every news outlet, from the high-minded broadsheets to the gossipy tabloids, was covering the story, linking back to Liam's original piece. Eleanor's name was mud. The vindication was swift and total. By noon, Omni Media, Aura's parent company, had released a statement. Eleanor Vance had been suspended, effective immediately, pending a full and thorough internal investigation. We all knew what that meant. It was corporate speak, for a firing with a severance package. 2 days later, a second, more final statement was released. Eleanor Vance had resigned to pursue other opportunities. She was gone. Erased in a way. Not by me, not directly, but by the consequences of her own actions, brought into the light. It wasn't about revenge. I told myself again. It was about a system correcting itself, once the truth was introduced. My new reality began to take shape in the aftermath. The story had created a massive conversation about the treatment of interns and junior staff in the creative industries. My secure inbox, the one I had created for the archive, was flooded with messages. Not just from other Aura interns, but from young people at record labels, ad agencies, film studios, all telling their own stories, all thanking me for giving them a voice. Chloe and I saw the opportunity. This was bigger than Aura. This was bigger than Eleanor Vance. We met for coffee, but this time it wasn't in a hurried, paranoid whisper. It was at a bright, sunny cafe, and we were two founders having a business meeting. We decided to use the momentum. We bought a domain name. That afternoon, theuncredited.com. Our mission statement was simple: to tell the stories of the people who do the work. The assistants, the interns, the junior crew, the invisible engines of the creative world. We wrote a proposal, a business plan, based on a subscription newsletter model, and long-form investigative packages. We used the buzz from the Vanguard article to approach a small ethical venture capital firm that specialized in funding independent media. They saw the vision. They saw the audience. They gave us a modest seed round, Enough to operate for a year. Enough to hire a small team. The final scene of my old life wasn't a confrontation. It was a quiet moment of creation in my new one. I was in our new office. A small rented space, with mismatched desks, and a coffee machine that hissed and sputtered. But it was ours. Chloe was next to me, sketching out a logo. My laptop was open, not to a document of grievances, but to a blank page for our very first article on the uncredited. There were no glass walls, no expensive art, no scent of jasmine and ozone. There was just the quiet hum of our computers, the smell of fresh coffee, and the limitless potential of a blank page. I hadn't climbed the ladder at Aura. I hadn't won the job they tried to bribe me with. I had done something far more important. I had taken the rotten foundation of a corrupt system and used it as the compost for something new, something healthy, something real. The vindication wasn't in seeing Eleanor fall. It was in the act of building something better in her place. My new reality wasn't about power over anyone else. It was about having agency over my own work, my own voice, my own life. It was a quiet victory, but it was total. A few weeks after the uncredited launched, a package arrived at our new tiny office. It was a framed print of Liam's article from the Vanguard. There was a small engraved plaque at the bottom. It just said the first draft of history. I'll see. I hung it on the wall. It wasn't a trophy of a battle won. It was a reminder. A reminder of what happens when one voice, multiplied by many, decides to speak the truth. Next to it, I hung another frame. It was a simple printout of the first email we received after the article dropped, from a former intern I'd never even spoken to. It just said, "I read the article. I cried for an hour. Thank you. I feel like I finally exist." That was the real trophy. The proof that what we had done mattered. It was never about the fall of one powerful woman. It was about the rise of many quiet voices. So that's my story. And maybe you're sitting there, listening to this, and it feels familiar. Maybe you're thinking about your own Eleanor, your own Aura. You're thinking about the credit you didn't get, the idea that was stolen, the thousand tiny ways you were made to feel small, invisible, and powerless. Maybe you're wondering if you should just quit, just walk away and let it go. I'm here to tell you that your voice is a powerful weapon, more powerful than you can possibly imagine. People will tell you to be patient, to pay your dues, to not rock the boat. They will tell you that this is just how the world works. But that is a lie designed to keep broken systems in place. I keep telling myself that what I did wasn't about revenge. I know it looks that way. It's a debatable point, and I still argue with myself about it. But when I'm being truly honest, I know it was about something deeper. It was about justice. It was about creating a consequence for actions that had none. It was about building something new and better out of the ashes of something that was meant to destroy me. It was about realizing that I didn't need to be accepted into their world. I had the power to create my own. Your work has value. Your ideas have value. Your voice has value. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you need their permission to use it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not to climb someone else's ladder, but to build your own, and then send a message to all the other people who are stuck on the ground floor, telling them to come and build with you. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or erased at your job, please let me know in the comments below. Reading your stories helps me, and it helps everyone else who watches this know that we are not alone. It's so important to know that you are not screaming into the void. And if you believe in the power of these stories, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and hit that subscribe button for more stories about turning the tables and reclaiming your worth. Thank you for listening.